On August 1st, 1981, an event happened that changed and defined music for the next 25 years or so. That was the day when MTV debuted. There had been attempts at music video channels before. There was a channel called the Now Explosion in Atlanta back in 1970. Some record stores had a music video promotional channel piped into their stores called Music Video TV. Shows like Soul Train, Top of the Pops, and American Bandstand occasionally used music videos during their shows. Plus, there was Don Kirshner's rock concert and also the Midnight Special and the Old Gray Whistle Test, which all used music videos and concert footage. Of course, the Beatles famously made music videos and small films in order to promote their music. However, it was a guy named Robert Pittman, who at that time was a media executive at Warner American Express Satellite Entertainment Company, say that 5 times fast. Thankfully, they changed the name to MTV Networks. He was the one who decided to give the idea of a video version of a radio station a national rollout, mainly because teenagers were being ignored by corporate media, and thus they were a completely untapped market with lots of disposable income. Sometimes it's about the vision and the passion. Most times it's about the money. Pittman tried the idea on WNBC television in New York City with a 15-minute show called Animal Tracks and based it on a show in New Zealand called Radio with Channels. His boss, John Lack, also had experience with the concept, having helped to run a show that was created by Michael Nesmith, formerly of the group The Monkees, called Pop Clips. They all decided to give this new idea a go, and at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on August 1st, 1981, MTV debuted. The long opening was of a space shuttle countdown, followed by the shuttle taking off and a photo of Neil Armstrong holding an MTV flag, followed by an animated MTV logo. A 30-second version of that opening, sometimes with a Saturn V rocket, ran at the top of every hour with the video jockeys, or VJs as they became known, telling you what was coming up during that next hour. Fun facts about the opening. The first words said on the network were said during the original opening. They were, quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," end quote. They were said by John Lack. The space shuttle part of the opening was discontinued in 1986 due to the January 28, 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. The MTV theme song that ran in the background was written by Jonathan Elias and John Peterson. The first video played on the channel was, of course, the famous prophetic "Video Killed the Radio Star" by the Buggles, which had as one of its members future super producer Trevor Horn. The first female singer on the channel was also the second video played overall on the channel. That honor belonged to Pat Benatar with the song "You Better Run." The first male solo artist was Rod Stewart with the third video, "She Won't Dance With Me." The rest of the top 10 videos played that day were Little Susie's "On the Top" by PhD, and who among us remembers that song? "We Don't Talk Anymore" by Cliff Richard, great song. "Brass in Pocket" by The Pretenders, another great song. "Time Heals" by Todd Rundgren, one of my favorite Todd Rundgren songs, I might add. REO Speedwagon's "Take It on the Run," not bad. And Styx's "Rockin' the Paradise," another good song. The first VJ shown on the channel was Mark Goodman, who now does an 80s streaming station on Sirius XM satellite radio. There were 5 original MTV VJs. Along with Mark Goodman, there was J.J. Jackson, Nina Blackwood, Martha Quinn, and Alan Hunter. As the VJs have said in many interviews over the years, the first couple of years felt like they were trying to build a plane while they were flying it. They were mainly a bunch of interns and wannabe actors who were filming in a shabby little studio on West 33rd Street in New York City and who were trying out new things and new ideas. In fact, the only quote-unquote adult in the room was the late, great J.J. Jackson, who had a radio DJ background. They all had a, well, what we got to lose? Let's just go for it attitude. After they got going, the filming moved to a studio on West 57th Street in New York. There were a few other problems with the channel at first. The first one was distribution. Not many people had cable. In fact, my neighborhood didn't get cable in Springfield, Massachusetts until 1983. The second was that there were extremely few minority artists being played on the channel. More on that in a little while. The third was that there weren't that many artists making music videos, at least not many American pop and rock artists, unless they were doing concert videos. To be sure, music videos had been around for decades, along with the aforementioned Beatles, Bob Dylan, ABBA, and the Rolling Stones all made them. And of course, who can forget Queen's iconic music video for Bohemian Rhapsody, which has earned the distinction of being its own meme. R&B artists were making videos, but again, MTV wasn't playing any of those. Instead, MTV started playing British artists who had been making music videos for years due to the uber-popular British BBC TV music show and institution Top of the Pops. Since that was all that MTV wanted to play, they played it pretty much nonstop. Thing was, people liked what they heard and went to the record stores to buy the singles and albums within the first few months. And that in turn made record labels get radio stations to play the music, and that, my friends, is how new wave music became a thing in America. Music videos got so popular that even artists who made music video parodies got famous. See Weird Al Yankovic and his music videos Eat It and Fat, which of course parodied Michael Jackson's Beat It and Bad. What was the influence of MTV? Oh, this is going to be a long one. Well, for starters, videos did kill the radio star. See, before that, it didn't really matter what you looked like because people were listening to your music. After that, image became everything. A lot of bands became roadkill in the video era, with lots of other bands who never would have made it big becoming huge stars because of the way that they looked. Also, MTV became appointment television. World video premieres became a huge thing. People had to rush home to catch the latest video from their favorite artists. Remember, kids, this was long before the internet became a thing. Hell, long before it even became known. If you missed something on television, then you completely missed it unless you either had an expensive VCR and could run it nonstop, if you had cool parents at least, or you had to sit there and wait for the video so you could tape it and watch it again later if you didn't have such cool parents. MTV started the era of the movie soundtrack. Actually, the movie Flashdance started it when they started combining movie clips with their soundtrack music in order to promote both the movie and the music soundtrack. And once that took off, every movie had to have a killer soundtrack, or at least one or two good songs that would get played on the radio. MTV also pushed genres like new wave, hair bands, and as we'll see later, hip-hop and grunge rock, although they were pretty late to the hip-hop party, but at least they got there. They also were late to the R&B and dance craze in the late 1980s and early 90s because they didn't play those videos either. Again, we'll get to that later. MTV's influence also didn't end with record sales. It affected television in general. MTV spawned a host of copycats, most notably a show called Friday Night Videos on NBC, which used to run after The Tonight Show. There was their own spin-off channel, VH1, which helped to push adult contemporary country rock or rock country, depending on how you look at it, and also new age music back in the 90s. Remember Yanni and Kenny G and all that? Oh, good times. Good music decade. There was Canada's version of MTV called Much Music, along with a copycat American channel called Fuse. MTV also caused the head of NBC television at the time, Brandon Tartikoff, to famously write on a napkin at a restaurant during a pitch session with a producer that for his next show, he wanted, quote, MTV Cops, end quote. That idea for the show became the trend-setting 80s cop show Miami Vice. We'll discuss the show in September's episodes when we talk about it when the show premiered. One thing that MTV does not get enough credit for is that it inspired an entire generation of kids to get into videography and editing, and in the process turned music videos into an art form. They also got artists to step up their game, turning some videos into, in some cases, mini-movies. Case in point, Michael Jackson's Thriller video. MTV also had hit shows of their own. There was a game show called Remote Control, which had Ken Ober, Colin Quinn, and Kari Wuhrer, and also was one of Adam Sandler's first shows. There was a dance show called Club MTV with Downtown Julie Brown, Wubba Wubba Wubba, Good night, God bless. Fun fact, before Camille Grammer was on one of those Real Housewives shows as Kelsey Grammer's ex-wife, she danced on Club MTV. There was a dating game show called Singled Out, which was hosted by pre-Nerdist and G4 TV Attack of the Show host Chris Hardwick, who was also a VJ back then. That show also made stars out of his co-hosts Jenny McCarthy and Carmen Electra. There was MTV Unplugged, which started out as an idea after John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora did an acoustic version of their song Dead or Alive during an MTV Video Music Award ceremony because the producers needed to fill a few minutes of the ceremony. The response was so good that they turned that idea into a show. And that idea, well, it kind of started out slowly at first, but then Paul McCartney did the show and released it as a bootleg album. After that, everybody wanted to do the show. It rejuvenated Mariah Carey's career at that time and yielded numerous hit albums, and even got Tony Bennett and Eric Clapton Album of the Year Grammys for their performances. There was also Headbangers Ball with host Ricky Rockman, which showed heavy metal videos. There was the late-night alternative rock show 120 Minutes with host Matt Pinfield, which introduced the mainstream to goth and alternative artists like The Cure and Depeche Mode. They also showed live concerts, which was how America saw the British half of Live Aid. There was also The Real World, which jump-started the latest wave of reality television, and who can forget Jersey Shore, 16 and Pregnant, Teen Mom, and The Hills. There was the original boasting show long before influencers, Instagram, and YouTube high-end real estate videos. The show simply named MTV Cribs. Remember, by the way, Master P and his gold fixtures, or Birdman and his mansion just for partying? There was MTV's groundbreaking news coverage called MTV News, which had, among others, journalists Kurt Loder, John Norris, Tabitha Soren, Serena Altschul, Allison Stewart, and Chris Connolly, among many others. Kurt Loder was the one who announced to the Gen X crowd that Kurt Cobain had passed away, as MTV broke into regular programming to announce it and to cover it for a good chunk of the night, actually. There was Total Request Live, its countdown show starring Carson Daly, who is now on NBC's Today Show lineup. MTV also got into politics by hosting nonpartisan Get Out the Vote programming and sponsoring presidential inauguration balls, and also doing an AIDS awareness campaign back in the day when AIDS was a huge thing and was not popular to talk about. I'm not sure what MTV shows now. I literally couldn't tell you. I haven't watched that channel in probably over a decade, maybe even two. The channel became irrelevant once they decided to shift as far away from music as humanly possible. In fact, the M in MTV doesn't even stand for music anymore. Literally, they changed it. To what? Couldn't tell you, but there's a lot of jokes on the internet. I get that YouTube, Vivo, and Spotify changed the dynamics and people weren't going to wait around to watch the latest videos. However, they could have at least stayed relevant with music documentaries, TV shows, movies, interview shows, anything really. Maybe their new owners will care enough to get MTV back to being something other than a channel where they do a couple award shows for things they don't even show, because right now they're just kind of there. However, back in the day, they were on the cutting edge of pop culture, and MTV's reign as kingmakers of music and pop culture all started at 12:01 a.m. on August 1st, 1981. As an added bonus, even though British music helped to propel MTV in the early 1980s, there was still no MTV in Europe. That changed on August 1st, 1987, when MTV Europe premiered. The channel is now called MTV Global. The first video played? Well, appropriately, it was Dire Straits with Money for Nothing, about a guy watching and commenting on music videos. The song also had Sting singing the MTV advertising slogan in the chorus, "I want my MTV." It's a great bunch of advertisements they did back in the day. The people who started MTV Europe, by the way, were Viacom, British Telecom, and the Robert Maxwell Group. If that name doesn't sound too familiar to you, well, Robert Maxwell was a World War II hero, literally, a British politician, and, oh yeah, a notorious British media and tabloid rag owner who mysteriously died in 1991 when he fell off of his yacht, which was named for his daughter, which we'll get to in a second. His body, by the way, was found floating in the Atlantic. After his death, it was discovered that he had embezzled millions of dollars from his company's pension funds. Oh, and one of his daughters that the yacht was actually named after, it was Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah, that Ghislaine Maxwell of Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew et al. Fame. Release the files. My only political comment. Anywho, back in the early 1980s, MTV had a bit of a racial problem. In the beginning, they were desperate to put on any music videos, which is why New Wave happened in America, because most artists who were making music videos at the time were British. However, because they considered themselves a rock format channel, they rarely played any R&B or dance videos. That also meant that for the most part, they didn't play any videos with minorities in them. It's not to say that there weren't videos or artists available to them, like Tina Turner, even before What's Love Got to Do with It. The Specials were the 74th video played on the channel, but they were a racially mixed band. Plus, they played ska music, which was well within MTV's wheelhouse. There were 209 videos played during the first day, and the only black people shown were the three black guys in the Specials and video jockey J.J. Jackson. Basically, in the early days, say the first few years, if you were black and your name was not Jimi Hendrix, you probably weren't getting played on MTV. I mean, if MTV considered themselves a rock music video channel, then they should have just called themselves RMTV. Would have made more sense. The rock format excuse was just MTV's excuse at the time, even though they were still very desperate to play any music videos. For example, on that first day, Phil Collins' iconic In the Air Tonight was played 5 times, along with April Wine and The Who, while Iron Maiden were played 4 times, along with The Pretenders, Tom Petty, Stevie Nicks, and Rockpile with Robert Plant. Even Mark Goodman gave that rock music channel excuse to David Bowie during an interview that famously reappeared online and started making the rounds when David Bowie passed away. I'll put up a link to that exchange between the two of them in the show notes if you want to check it out. David was not buying Mark Goodman's excuse about the channel needing to appeal to middle America, which is why that they weren't playing black artists. He wasn't buying that one single bit. This all changed in 1983 when CBS Records president Walter Yetnikoff made MTV an offer. Actually, he made a threat. See, he had this artist named Michael Jackson who had been trying to get his videos played on the channel. As a matter of fact, Michael had been making music videos for years, both as a solo artist and with his brothers, the Jacksons. If he didn't get his music videos played, Yetnikoff would pull every single video from every artist that CBS had on the channel. Back then, CBS Records was one of the biggest record labels out there, and they had a lot of artists on MTV. MTV relented, and they started playing Billie Jean, but only after it had hit #1 on the Billboard singles chart. Then, suddenly, it became a thing to play. And then Michael Jackson released the song Beat It with the now classic music video to go along with it. Both he and MTV got a lot of exposure. In fact, it's often said that Michael Jackson made MTV and MTV made Michael Jackson. I would say that statement is accurate. It was a pretty symbiotic relationship. One could not have really fully succeeded without the other. Still, even though they were starting to put on black artists, for the most part, they stayed away from one genre of music that was trying to get huge at the time, hip-hop, or rap music as it was called back in the 80s. They started to play some rap videos from artists like the Beastie Boys and Run DMC, but for the most part, rap was shown on extremely light rotation. This began to change in 1987. Filmmaker Jonathan Demme's nephew, the late director Ted Demme, was a fledgling production assistant for MTV that year. He and his partner Peter Doherty approached MTV with an idea. How about a rap show with interviews and music videos? MTV said sure, but don't put it on MTV in America, where rap was getting more popular. Put it on in MTV Europe, because I have no idea. I figure it was probably their version of doing the old Foghorn Leghorn. Go away, kid, you bother me. Now, go play with your little TV show over there, because we only gave it to you because your uncle is some kind of a big deal in America. That type of routine. Funny thing was, that little show of theirs got really popular in Europe. And after it found success overseas, MTV had no choice but to bring it stateside, and Demme and Doherty were given the green light to finally do it in America. The original American episode aired on August 6, 1988. The original host was rapper Fab Five Freddy, who was already a well-known name to hip-hop, along with, of course, Blondie fans when he was name-checked in the rap on Blondie's song Rapture. Afterwards, MTV developed a daily and weekend edition of the show. Fab Five Freddy hosted the weekend edition, and for the weekday edition, Demme turned to Dr. Dre, not the Dr. Dre of NWA fame or Snoop Dogg fame, and Ed Lover, who was a friend of Demme's from high school. The show became a big hit. It ran for 7 years and spawned copycats like Rap City and Sucker Free. Most importantly, it helped to push hip-hop even more into the mainstream due to the fact that by then, MTV had established itself into more homes and more countries. And it all started when the show, Yo MTV Raps, was broadcasted on MTV in America on August 6th, 1988.